In the heart of the dense blackthorn forest, under the eternal twilight that cloaked its ancient trees, a woman named Alara stood at the edge of a small clearing. Her cloak, tattered and stained with the dirt of countless journeys, billowed lightly in the evening breeze. Alara was not just any woman, she was a witch, one feared and revered for her mystical prowess, yet her heart had known more love than malice. That love had been ripped from her, leaving her soul hollow, save for a growing ember of vengeance. The day her life unraveled had been unremarkable at first. Her husband, Edric, a gentle blacksmith with a laugh that could melt the hardest of hearts, had kissed her cheek before heading to the village. He had promised to return before sunset, bringing the spices she loved for their evening meal. But the sun had sunk behind the mountains, painting the sky in hues of blood and ash, and Edric had not returned. Instead, a messenger arrived, pale-faced and trembling, bearing the grim tidings. Edric had been slain in the marketplace, an innocent victim in a skirmish instigated by the ruthless lord of the land, Lord Malvern. Grief had shattered Alara's world, but it was the villagers' whispers that stoked the fires of her wrath. Malvern's men had laughed as they spilled Edric's blood, mocking his pleas for mercy. The lord himself had watched from his carriage, indifferent to the pain he had sown. Justice, the villagers said, was a luxury only the powerful could afford. But Alara refused to accept this grim truth. She would carve her own justice from the darkness if need be. For days, Alara mourned in silence, retreating to the small cottage she and Edric had built with their own hands. Then, on the seventh night, she made her decision. If the natural order would not punish Malvern, she would invoke forces that would. Deep in the forest lay the ruins of an ancient temple, long abandoned and overgrown with ivy and moss. It was whispered among her kind that this temple housed the Nexus Stone, a relic of immense power that could amplify a witch's abilities tenfold. But such power came with a price. The journey to the temple was fraught with peril. Blackthorn Forest was alive, its trees whispering secrets to one another, their gnarled roots snaking across the ground like the tendrils of some unseen beast. Shadows moved where none should, and the cries of nocturnal creatures echoed through the night. Yet Alara pressed on, guided by a mix of desperation and determination. She carried with her a small satchel of herbs and charms, remnants of a simpler life that felt like a distant memory. Upon reaching the temple, Alara found it as foreboding as the tales described. Its stone walls were carved with runes that pulsed faintly with an eerie light, and its entrance was flanked by two statues of grotesque beasts. She hesitated for only a moment before stepping inside. The air was thick with ancient magic, a heady mixture of power and danger that made her skin prickle. At the center of the main chamber stood the Nexus Stone, a black crystal that seemed to drink in the light around it. Alara approached the stone and began the incantation she had spent days preparing. Her voice trembled at first but grew steadier as the words flowed. The air around her grew colder, and the ground beneath her feet vibrated with an unearthly hum. The stone responded, glowing faintly before erupting in a cascade of dark energy that enveloped her. Pain lanced through her body, but she did not falter. She had expected this. Power came at a cost, and she was willing to pay it. When the ritual was complete, Alara collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. She felt different, her senses sharper and her mind ablaze with knowledge she had not possessed before. Her hands trembled as she tested her newfound power, conjuring a small flame that danced across her fingertips. This was but a fraction of what she now held within her. Over the following days, Alara honed her abilities. She practiced spells that could rend the earth and summon storms, curses that could break minds and bind souls. The villagers, wary of her before, now avoided her entirely, their fear palpable. Alara did not care. Her heart beat only for vengeance. When she felt ready, Alara set her plan into motion. She began by targeting Malvern's men, the enforcers who had terrorized the village for years. One by one, they fell to her wrath. Some disappeared into the shadows, never to be seen again. Others met their end in more public ways, their lifeless bodies serving as a grim warning. The villagers, while terrified, secretly celebrated the fall of their oppressors. Rumors spread of a phantom witch exacting retribution, and tales of her deeds grew more elaborate with each retelling. But Alara's ultimate goal was Malvern himself. The Lord had retreated to his fortress, a sprawling estate surrounded by high walls and guarded by dozens of soldiers. Alara knew she could not simply storm the gates. Even with her powers, she needed a plan. She spent weeks gathering information, using spells to eavesdrop on conversations and bribe the spirits of the dead to reveal secrets. When the night of reckoning arrived, the forest seemed to hold its breath. Alara approached the fortress under the cover of darkness, cloaked in a veil of shadows that rendered her invisible to the guards. She slipped inside with ease, her footsteps silent as she navigated the labyrinthine halls. The air was thick with the stench of decadence, a stark contrast to the squalor of the village. She found Malvern in his grand hall, seated on a throne of gilded wood, surrounded by his sycophants. He was as arrogant as she had imagined, his sneer a permanent fixture on his face. Alara stepped forward, dispelling her cloak of shadows, and the room fell silent. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd as they beheld the witch, her eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Malvern rose from his throne, his bravado faltering for a moment before he barked an order to his guards. They moved to apprehend her, but Alara raised a hand, and with a single word, they crumpled to the ground, their weapons clattering uselessly. The sycophants fled in terror, leaving Malvern alone to face her wrath. "You took everything from me," Alara said, her voice cold and steady. "Now, I will do the same to you." Malvern tried to bargain, his tone shifting from commanding to pleading. He offered her wealth, land, even power, but Alara was unmoved. She raised her hands, dark energy crackling between her fingers, and unleashed a spell that shattered the throne and sent Malvern sprawling. She advanced on him, her steps measured and deliberate. "Mercy," he whimpered, his bravado now completely gone. "Please, spare me." Alara hesitated for a moment, the weight of her actions pressing down on her. But then she remembered Edric's face, his smile, his warmth, and the laughter they had shared. The ember of vengeance within her flared into an inferno. She whispered an incantation, and Malvern's cries were drowned out by the roar of her magic. When it was over, the grand hall was in ruins, and Malvern was no more. Alara stood amidst the wreckage, her heart heavy but her resolve unbroken. She had avenged her husband, but the cost had been great. The power she had unleashed had left its mark on her, a darkness that now lingered in her soul. As she left the fortress, the first rays of dawn broke through the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson. The villagers, emboldened by the fall of their oppressor, began to rebuild their lives. They spoke of Alara in hushed tones, some hailing her as a savior, others fearing her as a harbinger of doom. But Alara did not stay to hear their words. She returned to the forest, to the solitude of her cottage, where she could mourn and reflect on what she had become. The forest welcomed her back, its whispers less ominous now, as if acknowledging her triumph. Alara knew she could never return to the life she once had, but she also knew she had fulfilled her promise to Edric. Justice had been served, and though her heart remained heavy, she found solace in the knowledge that she had not faltered when it mattered most.